Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Psychological Impacts of Online Education on Students during COVID-19. A pandemic-induced digital adoption has impacted education institutions around the world, where university and schools were forced to shut down and operate online. These created new challenges for students, teachers, and administrators involved in shaping the new normal in the classroom. India experienced a horrific second wave throughout the last 4 months, and there were uncertainties around whether students could go back to the offline on-campus mode. The Indian government has recently dismissed Year 12 exams in the wake of a continuing pandemic, and a decision is yet to be made about reopening school and university campuses. So it's evident that challenges of online learning are here to stay a little longer than expected. Online education changes all components of teaching and learning in higher education. Challenges faced by online learners range from adapting to virtual domain of online education to the isolation and anxiety experienced during the pandemic. The teachers have their own set of challenges that may include communication barriers, online fatigue, and motivation issues experienced from the sudden transition onto the virtual mode. To address the complex issue of how students and teachers are responding to online education, not only as a medium of technical migration, but also one that fosters or restricts psychosocial interaction, we have with us experts from both Australia and India. I'd like to welcome Professor Amlan Chakrabarti, Director of A.K. Chaudhary School of Information Technology at the University of Calcutta. Professor Chakrabarti's research interests include machine learning, computer vision, cyber physical systems, and quantum computing. So this is quite a diversion from his usual domain of expertise, and it's very kind of him to be a part of this webinar. Thanks, Professor. Joining us from Melbourne, we have Stevan. Stevan has worked as a family therapist and a case manager in not-for-profit family services in Victoria. He specializes in family preservation and reunification multisystemic therapy, also known as a MST psych therapy. For the viewers, multisystemic therapy, MST, is an intensive family and community-based treatment for serious juvenile offenders with possible substance abuse issues and issues related to their families. The primary goal of MST is to decrease youth criminal behavior and out-of-home placements. Stev is also the founder of 360 Counseling and has graduated from RMIT with a Bachelor of Applied Science in Psychology and a graduate diploma in Statistics and Operations Research. He also graduated with a master's degree in psychological counseling from Monash University. We also have with us Dr. Tathagata Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is the founder and managing director of Sahayta Clinic in Calcutta. A practicing psychiatrist for the past 7 years, Dr. Chatterjee is also a faculty member of the Department of Psychiatry at the KBC Medical College, Jadavpur, Calcutta, where he teaches both undergraduate and postgraduate students. Dr. Chatterjee holds a degree in medicine from Ramachandra Medical College in Chennai and an MD in psychiatry from Dr. D.Y. Patel Medical College in Navi Mumbai. Apart from general psychiatry, Dr. Chatterjee's areas of interest include sexual disorders, addiction disorders, including new age addictions such as internet addiction, gaming addiction, and OCD. So Professor, we'll start with you. What has been the most significant challenge in your experience of migrating to online training during lockdown?
Yeah, the most, I think, that was thinking on the university scenario, as I mostly teach in university. Okay, it is the digital divide is the major challenge, right? We have students from different economic background, different social background, right, who are joining our courses, right? And we find that once they're in our classrooms or in our university laboratories, they're all same, right? But now these classes they're attending from their home, right, in their home environment, and everyone's home environment is different, right? Depending on the we have also students from different states, okay, who join our. Basically, I'm also speaking about the engineering faculty where I teach. So this is a major challenge. So when I try to say something or try to convey some assignments to the students, then I find that different students have different types of the utensils or the devices they have to do those. Secondly, also they have different types of ambience in their home, right? Sometimes they have electricity issues, power issues, right? Which actually that is, and we don't know what is happening there actually, right? So we are fine to understand, okay, our city environment, the environment where we live in, but we don't know what's the environment. Student from a village in West Bengal or village in Bihar or Uttar Pradesh or Orissa, what type of challenges they're facing. And so we cannot pressurize a student much in this in this particular scenario. Normally when we do it in our class, okay, they stay in hostels or they stay in the city, okay, and we can push them a lot on the, okay, come up with the assignments for the next within couple of days and submit your lab and submit your all these things. So this we cannot press. So now the big issue is that we are in a middle, that we don't know that what is actually happening at their end, right? And we are extending our evaluation gaps, which may be sometimes distressing for the students who are having everything fine, right? And equally very that means equally it is having a different type of effect for the students who are a little bit different in their home conditions, or the way they work with the digital devices. And that's, I think, the major issue.
Thank you for that, Professor. So Dr. Chatterjee, over to you. Insights on the challenges faced by students in online classes clearly indicate that universities must become more aware about the psychosocial needs of students as they migrate to online platforms. So what are some psychological challenges experienced by students during lockdown? Just carrying on from what Professor was talking about.
Right. So I would like to say that, when we are talking about students, I would not just like to limit the students who are studying in universities. There are students, who are studying in play schools, kindergarten, middle school, high school, all of them together. Some of the biggest challenges that we are seeing that they're facing is, there is a feeling of despair. There is a feeling of isolation that that these children are facing. Not only children, some adults too, young adults mainly. There are also things like, there is a lack of self-motivation. They're not being able to motivate themselves because, they lack the peer pressure that they generally are accustomed to when they're working in the natural environment of other students being there. Then, of course, one of the main things that's been there for, I think, everyone, not just for students, is like, the fear of losing a close one that has been there throughout the pandemic. It's, of course, like I mentioned, it's not limited to students alone. It's there with all of us, I believe, and of course, there has been the number of cases of childhood anxiety and depression has been on the rise. And it's quite shocking, the number of cases that we get nowadays on a daily basis, as to how many kids show up at our outdoor facilities having all the symptoms of depression or even anxiety. Other than that, I also believe, some of the things, I read a very interesting study the other day. So Ahmedabad is, as all of us are aware, is a pretty big city in India, in the state of Gujarat. So one of the studies that they did, one of the private hospitals, they did the study in which they showed that, the children who are at a developing age, infants and young children, so they generally tend to pick up a lot on the social cues. And social cues, has a lot to do with your entire face. Now that, half of the face is covered up with the mask, they're unable to pick up those cues. So the social development entirely is getting delayed. And till, these are, of course, very new studies. We do not know as to how big an impact it's actually going to have in the future. But, things like that are also happening. And of course, even if it's not for young and infants and young children, there are other things that these students are missing out on. When they're in school, they tend to pick up qualities like leadership. They tend to pick up qualities like sharing, accepting one's boundaries. And all those are, of course, going amiss now that they're all isolated in their own houses. Of course, they're not being able to develop such social skills. Other things like extracurricular activities, like, some people are interested in music, some are good in sports, drama, whatever it is, they're not being able to participate in that. It's only academic based, right now. And all of that is, of course, creating quite a change in the mental health of the students.
Thanks for that. And moving on to Stevan, just to get the introductory phase up and running. So Stev, Australia managed to curb the chain of transmissions with an aggressive suppression strategy. And lockdowns were a salient part of the strategy. However, Victoria has experienced several lockdowns and the one it's experiencing right now as well, as we speak, over the past year. And now we have Sydney going into another lockdown. How have students coped up with the situation there?
I think initially with the beginning of the lockdown, there was a lot of sort of technological aspects of it being identified. Not all students having the right Wi-Fi connections, laptops with cameras and so on. But the government stepped in and there was supports for that. There was Wi-Fi dongles being handed out and laptops and stuff being provided and so on. So that all picked up, and there was an initial fear in the students of COVID and everything, and they were sort of, especially children with problematic behaviors that we've seen, they were actually starting to spend more time inside the houses. So you've had these children that were, very commonly absconding and, getting in trouble, stealing cars, robbing shops and so on. And all of a sudden they're in the house, they're not actually leaving. And that came as a bit of a surprise to everyone. We all thought they'll just continue absconding. But as things have sort of, the lockdown progressed and it got longer and longer, they very soon started to, accommodate to it and, get back into their old ways. So that's pretty much what I can sort of say. That was slightly different to what you guys are saying, but it's in a sense, a lot of that same stuff has been experienced. They've been isolated from their social connections. Those spending the time with the students on the bus and the transport to the school, to from school, the lunches, the resources, all these social interactions have just been curbed. And in Australia, it's very common to really not know your neighbor. I've come a bit of a, as a hybrid with the dual culture. I've grew up in Serbia and Australia, and in Serbia we all know our neighbors, and you hang out with your neighbors. But
similar to India,
in Australia, you don't know your neighbors, and so you got all of a sudden people sort of being put in this awkward situation where they now have to mingle with their neighbors, and I've seen some interesting things, like people waving to you all of a sudden on the street that your neighbors that wouldn't really wave to you. It's everyone's going out for walks and stuff, and it's like, oh, you're meeting them in the park and so it's, if anything, there's been some sort of positive, positive sort of things coming out of it. And before this recording, I was telling you, like in the street that I was at living in before this place where I'm living now, in the earliest starts of the pandemic, there was a lot of in the street, there was a lot of houses and a lot of families from Punjabi origin, and they all spoke the same language and everything, but they didn't actually know each other and they didn't really mingle. But as COVID sort of, put restrictions to the kids going to the park, kids not going to school, they had bored kids, so they had to come to the streets. They had to mingle, and they all started to mingle and get to know each other. So yes, there was definitely positive things, but we're gonna wait for a couple of years to see really what's the negative things that are happening, and we're all tied into the houses. For example, in child first referrals, which is a system that we use in family services, have actually, we expected the number of referrals to increase, but it wasn't the number, it was the severity of the referrals, the complexity of the referrals. Domestic violence has actually gone up significantly. We've had families that would have been flying under the radar that never would have hit services, that all of a sudden now have the domestic violence actually escalated. Loss of job, loss of income, there was people losing their businesses and so on. And just the domestic violence just went up.
We'll come to the severity a bit later on. Let's
Yeah.
try and focus it more towards the students. But that's a very good point, and thanks for raising the positive aspect, which you don't really get to see or hear about much right now.
Yeah.
So we'll move back to Professor Chakrabarti. Professor, in the past year, have you observed students experiencing psychological challenges during classes, and has there been a visible impact on their academic performance?
Yeah, there has been. Actually, that was not from my university, but from other universities also. I have friends, and they have reported very some scenarios which are really we have to think upon. Scenarios like that, it is not only affecting the students who are a little bit in the what I can say in terms of academic achievements a little bit backwards, but it is also affecting the students who are frontliners in academic achievements, right? As Dr. Chatterjee rightly pointed out, that the students are missing the peer pressure. Students are missing the hand-holding what they used to get in the physical lecture classes, and that's why many of the good students, they are just lost out. Okay, they're just having tremendous mental depression, right? They're depressed because they can now understand that they are missing a lot, right? And that is many of the cases in the undergraduate courses, what you are supposed to learn, you don't get the opportunity to learn those courses at the postgraduate level. So these students who are actually top students in the school level and have joined universities or colleges, okay, for their undergraduate courses, they are really in a great depression. That what will happen to me? What I am not getting the proper discussions with the faculties. I'm not exposed to the libraries and laboratories. So what I am learning, whether it will really pay me back, okay, when I join as a professional. Secondly, there is a tremendous pressure for the masters and the PhD students also, as I find, because masters and the PhD students, they normally move in the different international institutes. Okay, either they go for PhD or they go for postdocs. Now the time schedule of each of these joining, are getting very spread out. They don't know when they will get a visa, whether they will at all get a visa within the 3 months. What will be their funding scenario? Because the fundings have shrunken. So these are all leading to depressions, and also many of the times the university or the institute process is getting elongated due to this COVID scenario. The exams cannot be held at proper interval. So the timelines are getting rescheduled. There are some questions, okay, in terms of joining the next course or next research project. So these are all affecting the students who are really looking forward to get something or to go for achieving something. So it is true that both the type of the students, are getting affected, right? And this is really a cause of concern, and we don't know what is the timeline of COVID, and that means, and in different countries the timelines are different. So that is really a cause of concern.
I'd like to ask you another question, Professor Chakrabarti, in terms of your department specifically, and how does your department assist with, the psychological issues experienced by students, and what are some concrete policies in place? I know you've mentioned other universities, but we'd like to get a little bit more information about, how does Calcutta University assist these students?
Yeah, so we have a teacher-student committee, and normally we are now making the committee meeting very regularly. Okay, that is normally we used to have 2 meetings in a semester. Okay, now we are trying to enhance this. Basically, mostly for the different types of the assessments now we are doing. The assessments are getting a different way now, right? We are not assessment was these are all online assessments, and these are all different ways we're assessing the students now. Secondly, is regarding the placements. Regarding the placements, also, as you know, that the placement is all online now. But previously, there would have been a stepwise. the company is to come to the campus, gives a motivational lecture to the students that, hey, these are the things you can get in our company. And then there is a stage-wise process which actually goes for placement. And now everything is going online, and there is a very less personal connectivity or personal touch. The people offering the jobs and the students who are going for the campus interview. So that is to boost the students that okay, you're not alone, though you are doing the placement from your home. You are not attending the placements from your campus, because attending something from campus gives a better what I can say, better strength to the students, right? In terms of the peer and in terms of the support they get in the campus. So we are trying to build up the psychological, boosting the strength of theirs, to supporting them, our placement team and the departmental faculty members. We are focusing, but apart from this, we don't have much. That means our psychology department actually, they are organizing workshops for the students, in regular intervals. But truly speaking, our department doesn't have that type of. That means our fact doesn't have that type of capability to inject the psychological inputs. Rather, we try to just boost them mentally. Right, and that's the process we are doing now.
Dr. Chatterjee, thanks, Professor. Dr. Chatterjee, moving on to you. As Professor mentioned, regular student and teacher meet, trying to assist them with the psychological issues with virtual online mode and etc. But do you think universities are doing their bit, or could they have a more robust and active psychological counseling program or access point in place for students and teachers together? Any suggestions?
Right. I still believe, at least in India, cannot talk about the international numbers, but at least in India, the number of counselors that are there in place, the number of counselors to student ratio is still quite poor, abysmally poor, I must add, for which, it's very difficult for just a handful of counselors to, help such a huge number of students going through this transition. And let's make no mistake about the fact that it's a huge transition, from the way that students used to interact in college to the way that they're interacting with each other, as well as with the programs that is being offered to them right now. It's a huge transition. And, of course, there are a lot of challenges that they're facing, all the challenges nearly everyone has pointed out, be it the internet, being the fact that, they are trying to do it, they're all remotely like studying, they're trying to get their act together, they're trying to get their different projects together done. All of it is extremely different from the way that they were accustomed to. So and they definitely need help other than the help that they're getting from the teachers. They need someone to guide them, hold their hands. And so currently the situation is such, at least in India, the number of counselors that are being provided by the universities and the colleges as well as the schools are pretty low as compared to the number of students that they have. So the ratio has to improve. Other than that, I believe the programs that are being offered to the students, regardless of where they are in the school or in the colleges, has to be a bit more robust, has to be a little bit more dynamic. The management, I would think the administration has to look a little bit further than just looking at the bottom line of turning a profit. That definitely needs to change. I don't mean just the schools and colleges. There are umpteen number of services who offer private education, who are just going on onboarding new students day in and day out, and without much to offer as far as one-on-one counseling, one-on-one teaching is supposed to be there. Teachers, I think they need to make the classes a little bit more interactive so that the students do not lose interest in those classes. They feel that they are being included, because there will of course be a lot of students who, until and unless are being forced into talking and answering, that they would actually be lost in the crowd. So it has to be a little bit more interactive. That's the way I would look at it.
You are muted, Aparajita.
Yeah, Aparajita, you're muted, sorry.
Thanks, Dr. Chatterjee and Professor. I think with the time limitations, we have to continue the rest of the discussion in our part 2 of the series. We'll be looking at the motivation levels of teachers and students and the severity of the cases that have come about due to the online migration. So thank you, everybody, and let's focus on part 2. Thank you, all the speakers. I'll see you in a bit.